Let's drink some coffee. Let's pump some iron. Let's start a company. It's Coffee Moguls. It's Coffee Moguls. Welcome, everyone. This week, I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast Taylor Crane, the founder of Clubs Poker, a new website for everyone to play poker together. I'll let him share the details about that. And then after that interview, we'll be going through my new segment, The Hacker Huddle, where we'll talk about minting an NFT using the Solana blockchain. And welcome, Taylor. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nathan. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to have you on because we've been playing in some of these online cash games together just as a fun thing. And it's been a blast. So I was really excited to get you to come on the podcast and tell me a little bit about what you're working on. So before we dive in on that, though, as you know, the name of the podcast is Coffee Moguls, and you were telling me something before the podcast that might be a little unsettling to our listeners, so why don't you go ahead and share that fact?
Yeah, I shared that I think I've probably had about 5 cups of coffee in my entire life. And if I'm being really accurate, I would imagine that none of those 5 cups did I get like past halfway through. Yeah, it's just never been a part of my life. I mean, I will say that like I love the smell of coffee. I love the culture around coffee. I love the variety of, just like the coffee shop, the whole thing. I spend so much time in coffee shops and never actually drink the coffee. And it's just because like caffeine has just never been a part of my life. And I just figured, why bother introducing it now? I feel like I'm doing pretty good without it.
Nice. Yeah, so you're just no caffeine at all kind of person?
Yeah, on very rare occasions do I feel like I need to have caffeine, and I would typically go for like a tea, only because if I go for a coffee, I am just completely wired. And so, yeah, like times where I'll go for like a tea is if like got absolutely no sleep the night before and need to be like, on my A game the next day, or actually playing poker sometimes. So like poker tends to be a late night game. If I'm playing online or if I'm playing at a casino, there are certainly times where I need a little bit, like a few hours worth of a caffeine kick, and I'll go for it too.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that has been surprising as I've been learning to play is how mentally fatiguing it can be. And that's funny. I'm actually almost a little envious because I'm just such a fiend for caffeine that, it certainly takes its pound of flesh. It's not exactly easy on the adrenals, so good on you if you can get by without caffeine.
So far, so good. We'll see. We'll see how the founder journey does for that caffeine.
That might make it a little harder. You'll at least have to have it around for anyone that comes to visit. All right, let's get into the good stuff, though. Enough joking around about coffee. So tell me a little bit about your background and what's led you to this moment where you've started Clubs Poker.
Yeah, turns out that we have to rewind like 15-ish years. So I guess the journey starts when I'm in college. Picked up poker as a passion and a hobby, and throughout college became quite a serious poker player. That was my life. And when I graduated college, I sort of had that like fork in the road moment where I could have decided like, hey, do I want to try and go professional? Become a professional poker player. Definitely was not good enough at the time, but did I want to like put in the effort to try and make that a thing, or do I pivot to my second passion, which is tech and startups? And I ended up making that pivot or that mindset change. I moved to New York City and spent the last 10 years in the New York City startup scene, mostly working as a product manager, so alongside teams of engineers and designers, and thought that I left the poker world entirely behind me. In fact, for most of the last 10 years, I hadn't played much poker. I would play, occasionally in casinos on like vacations, but that's, and then, in some games in New York City, of course, but like that's basically it. And it was always just like a little like recreational thing that I would do occasionally. And then COVID hits, and I, have an experience that many of us went through where we're trying to play poker like we used to back in high school, with or high school or college, whatever it was, like, with our friends is the point, and trying to create that home game experience in an online environment we learned was just incredibly difficult. And that's what kicked off this whole journey to create the platform or the product that we were dreaming of, and it became Clubs Poker.
Right. Yeah. Your sort of fork in the road path there between becoming a poker player and joining tech reminds me a little of my story where I badly wanted to be a musician. Turns out people are willing to pay you a lot more to sling code, which is a little disappointing. But, that's the way of the world, and I still get to play, so everything worked out. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what clubs poker is and sort of where everything is today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very simply, we're making it dead simple for groups of friends to play poker together online. So, really, what I sort of the higher level, what we're trying to do here is reposition the game of poker as less a game about gambling and more a game about creating a great social experience amongst friends or colleagues or people, within your network. And yeah, make it less about gambling, more about having fun. So that's what we're trying to do. So if you go to clubspoker.com right now, you can spin up a poker game, a private poker game with your friends in just 30 seconds. Create a table, send your friends a link, start playing, play for however long you want, and then it's all, of course, play money chips. So there's no like deposits or withdrawals of any kind of real money. It's all just entirely play money and meant to facilitate the experience that many of us have had where we're in our friends' basements or apartments, and we're ordering pizzas and having beers and having a great time while playing a game together.
Totally, yeah. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing to make that experience more of a kind of community or friendship oriented thing and less of a just a degenerate gambler type of thing.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, when you compare us to most of the poker sites or apps out there, we are private games only, right? So you cannot just like come to clubs and play against random strangers. We don't allow it. It's entirely about coming together, inviting again, either a group of friends or colleagues or whomever in your network into a private game, playing it. And we're doing some things already that speak to trying to make the game a bit more fun. So one quick example, and Nathan, you might have seen this when we played together, is we show you a little trophy icon next to your name that counts how many hands you've won. This is of absolutely no importance when you're playing against strangers, or maybe of minimal importance when you're playing against strangers for real money, but becomes quite a fun talking point when you're playing with friends. And so that's just like one quick little example. I think like we've got certainly a long ways to go to meet our mission of becoming like the destination for social poker. There's of course a lot of inspiration out there, but yeah, we're just like trying to find ways to, another example is that summary page that you see at the end where it tells you like who won the most hands, who won the biggest pot of the night, and like how all your friends did, and some cool stats. Again, just like trying to find ways to make it more social, more fun, give people more things to talk about, while they're playing, and more ways to enjoy the game. And then I expect that list of like social features will just grow over time as we continue to expand the product, build up the team, et cetera.
Totally, yeah. One of the funny things about working on a new product is there's never an end to the things people can sort of dream up about the next direction where you might want to take it. So whether it's from your users or in-house, there's always a new thing to think about there. And actually these the stats I find really fun in the hand replays. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like the hand replays are fun. What it allows you to do is after a hand is over, you can check out the replay and you can just like see the action all over again. And this is helpful if like you have a really big hand and you just want to like see what the hell your friend was calling with, or how they played this hand, and you can either give them congratulations or make fun of them. So that's one common use case for the hand replays. And the stats are interesting too. Like some of the stats are like super basic again, like just like number of hands won or who won the biggest pot of the night. Some of the stats we show are things that any serious poker player would expect, and these are stats about like your performance. We call them VPIP and PFR. If any poker players are listening, they might know what those mean. And that tells you a bit about your style of play. And there are certain numbers that professional poker players like to see and not see when they're playing. But then we're also like making up our own stats too that we think are interesting and we've always wanted for ourselves. And so my favorite stat is the hand strength stat, which tells you over the course of your night or day, whenever you're playing, over the course of your session, let's say that, how lucky or unlucky were your starting hands that you were dealt. This has absolutely nothing to do with how you played those hands. It's just a matter of like, did you get good starting hands or bad starting hands over the course of your session? And what this is meant to answer is, ever playing poker and you play for a couple hours with your friends and you just sit there the whole time, you kind of feel like you're getting card dead, you're just like not getting any cards to play. Or you see a friend of yours and they're just like cleaning up, winning every hand, and you're like, how is this possible? Well, the hand strength stat tells you something like, maybe for you it's 15%. So like that means the 15th percentile compared to an average set of starting hands, which is pretty bad. So you got pretty unlucky. or 85% would mean like you got actually great starting hands over the course of the session. So by no means is it meant to explain entirely, who won or who lost or why they won or lost, but it's meant to give you maybe some comfort that, hey, you know what? You didn't play many hands because you got dealt, poor cards, and there's not really much you could have done.
Right. Yeah, it takes some of that emotion and guesswork out of it, right? Where you're often finding yourself saying, well, I know I did badly. I lost my stack, but I don't know if that was because I just played badly or because of the natural kind of variance, the swings up and down, just like anything in life. You're going to have some ups and downs. So I find that really fun, and especially as a sort of quantity numbers guy, I really want to dig in on that some more. So how are things going so far? How's getting users been and building out kind of the community and the growth?
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me. I've learned so much. Like I've worked on a number of products over the last number of years. B2B, B2C, marketplaces, really just spans the spectrum. And this is the first time I feel like I've worked on a product where we are building something that people already do regularly, right? People play poker around the world regularly, and B, they're desperate for something better, absolutely desperate. And so it's been really interesting to see just like organic growth, first of all, like how the site has been able to just grow via word of mouth. And we've invested very, very little in growth so far. I can explain why, but done a few things. Like when we first launched the beta, I did a little bit of an effort in building up a wait list and building up like initial beta users, and it kind of grew organically to the point where we were doing about one game per day on clubs, which we were happy with. Like, one group of friends per day was playing poker game on clubs for a while, and that was growing to 2 games, 3 games a day, etc. But just through, organically. Then something happened in March that was just really interesting or informative for me, which is there was a competitor site of ours that was unfortunately shutting down. And they were shutting down because if you remember, Chrome sunset Adobe Flash at the end of 2020. A few months ago, and their site was built on Adobe Flash, and so they had to shut down, and there was nowhere for their users to go. And so I created a partnership with them where I said, listen, let's give your users a way to transition from your site into another site so they can continue playing the game they love with their friends. And created a partnership, and we did a domain name redirect. And overnight, we went from doing like 2 games a day to what we're doing now, probably like 40 to 50 games a day on clubs. I think the numbers, yeah, probably about 50 games a day on clubs, and just entirely through that one partnership and the domain name redirect, and yeah. So my opinion is like it is absolutely incredible to me that how many people are already playing on clubs, and given the time investment that we put into actually like intentionally growing the site, I can't wait for the time when we can actually like put real effort behind it, real dollars behind it, and really spread the word.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, to see just organic growth like that where you haven't really stepped on the gas in terms of buying ads or whatever, sponsoring conferences, that kind of stuff, as well as all the other kind of content creation and that kind of stuff that you can do. That's fantastic, and it just gives you even more to leverage, when you really do step on the gas in those other ways. How about scalability? How is the site handling that increase in volume?
Yeah, me and my co-founder for as long as we've been building the project have been talking and like sort of like positing like when is the point at which the site is going to start breaking down, like from a scale and infrastructure perspective. My co-founder's name is Jordan, has always said in his head, it's like his number is 1,000 concurrent games, not just games a day, but concurrent games, as to when he expects the site to start seeing stretch marks and issues. We're nowhere near there, and so like to date we've had no issues. We're, like, just quick TLDR on our stack. So we're a React Web App, a Rails backend, Postgres on the DB, and using AWS, Roku as well. And that combination, yeah, we're just like not anywhere near the point yet where we have to do kind of optimizations. Can't wait to get there, but not there yet.
Yeah, that 1,000 users sounds like it's kind of that we can't hack around anymore. We have to really roll our sleeves up and do some fundamental work to change this and make it better. That's good to know. It's good to know. I really do think a lot of people have a tendency to sort of over-engineer things. And one of the things that you said earlier that made me think that's really smart, I think a lot of engineers in particular, myself being an engineer, wouldn't have necessarily seen that opportunity, is that partnership that you did. So you saw an opportunity to kind of make a win-win happen, and it was all in sort of meat space, right? In the land of just people shaking hands and doing deals. And so I really think that's easy to overlook.
Yeah, the partnership was kind of like a shot in the dark at the time. In hindsight, it's just absolutely obvious that it was a great thing to do, but that's hindsight. At the time, my you know, my thought was like, hey, maybe I should reach out to this guy who built the site and like see if we can put something together. And if we put something together, like maybe it might give us more users, maybe. And so I was super surprised, and it's taught me a lot about like how I now think about growth going forward. I have some interesting ideas for when we get more serious about
Yeah,
that.
would you share some of them? Like, what are you thinking about?
Sure, I think like high level, like there are a lot of there's really a graveyard in the long tail of poker apps of different kinds that have sort of like poker is one of those things that's like it's a passion for many people, including engineers, and so it's a common like I'm an engineer, I want a side project, I like poker, let me build a poker app. And there's enough demand for poker that some of these apps have gotten like, some reasonable user bases, right? Where people are playing, or maybe it's not a poker app where you're playing poker, but it's a poker app where you're like studying the game or like playing against a bot to learn more, etc. All different flavors of it. And I think that there's a great opportunity for us to just create partnerships, bigger and bigger partnerships as we grow and scale, and bringing new users to our platform via partnering with all sorts of small indie developers or companies that have done something in the poker space.
I found it pretty tricky to find good, reliable, quality apps that cover that kind of stuff and also are easy to use for newbies.
So it's actually funny. It's like the poker software that's currently out there in the world is there's so much of it because again, poker is a huge industry. There's so much software out there, and the software can be incredibly helpful and have great utility, but often is not a great experience to use. Right, the interface is really poor. Like I remember like years ago when I was like really playing poker, I was using software called Poker Tracker, which is basically a layer that sits on top of a SQL database and allows you to analyze your hands and your play over the course of like thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of hands. That software is still used today and like hasn't really changed in 10 plus years. There's a ton of opportunity to bring like a modern software, modern design, lean UX, lean iterative development type approach that you and I, practice in our jobs to the poker software world. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with clubs.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. And it's probably a good segue for a couple of these other questions that I have. So, first of all, well, what's got you excited to work on next?
Yeah, so there are three things that I'm really excited about on our horizon. The first is when we can start what I say shifting into growth mode, which means like actually paying more attention to it and leaning into it and making that investment. And I think like I'm kind of a perfectionist, and there are things that we want to build into the platform before we do that. Things that we feel like are table stakes, no pun intended, that we want in the experience before really confidently going out and saying this is the best poker app out there for friends. So I'm excited about that, and then I'm excited about multi-table tournaments. So or short for that is we call it an MTT, multi-table tournament. And the reason MTTs are so exciting is because there is massive demand from organizations, companies, charities, even large groups of friends or networks that want to host online tournaments with like 50 players, 100 players, etc. And there's legitimately like virtually zero software to do this. And so I am getting inbounds frequently from charities, from companies that are looking to do these kinds of poker events. And I can't wait to have like the proper MTT product for them that I know that it will just like knock it out of the park. And so that's super exciting. And then I think even more exciting to me personally is we like what we call like the actual organization that goes into your poker nights. So Nathan, you and I play in a poker night hosted by our friend Wiz. And he does a lot of manual work putting that poker night together every single month. And he has a growing mailing list of techies like us that all want to play. And he has to email them manually, manage the RSVPs. He's never quite sure who's coming on any given night. And we are going to start building tools for hosts like him to organize their poker nights and grow their poker communities. So the end state is, imagine having like, hosts that can grow their poker club, aka Clubs Poker, into 20 players, 50 players, 100 players, 1,000 players that are all playing poker together and all have some kind of common connection. For our group, it's techies, that enjoy poker, but you can imagine, investment bankers in New York City, having a poker club on Clubs, or you can imagine, um, you know, I don't know, retirees in Boca Raton, Florida, that flew down from New York and are now living in Florida to have their own poker community on Clubs as well. And I mean, there's two random examples, but kind of the sky's the limit there. So I'm really looking forward to building the proper like Clubs feature, which is how we got the name Clubs Poker in the first place. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about that, and I even asked about that in the most recent game we played, where there's just all this glue that currently we have a person doing, just our friends putting it all together across 3 or 4 different apps, and I think there's a lot of potential there for consolidating that into Clubs Poker directly and just kind of doing as much as you can for them. And I like that idea that there is a really large probable market out there. Um, I mean, do you think we're seeing kind of a new wave of poker enthusiasm? Because, I mean, I'm sort of new, so I don't really know, but I think it got really popular in the 2000s, right?
Definitely, yeah. So I think like if you graph poker enthusiasm over time, or really just poker play over time, the high level is what you see is like a slow and steady growth up until 2003, when it absolutely boomed. So that's the money. We call it the moneymaker boom. It's named after Chris Moneymaker. 2003 is when we started watching poker on ESPN. When many of us, including myself, started playing poker with our friends in high school, and is when we first got into the game in the first place. It boomed from 2003 to 2011, and then after 2011, it started to dip and dipped until about 2016, and since 2016 has just been on its own tear again. And then 2020 with the pandemic has pushed it past the previous peak in 2011. And I hope it continues, and I'm certainly doing everything I can to help that continue. Because yeah, it's such an awesome game. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, and speaking of, that's another question I had. Aside from Clubs Poker, more just generally speaking, where do you see the landscape of poker, whether it's online or in real life, evolving in the coming years?
Yeah, this is a really good question and something that is hotly debated within the poker community. And my answer is going to be nuanced. Um, uh, yeah, so what you basically have in the poker world, and this applies to poker, but if you play chess, then this also applies to chess. This applies to a lot of games. Uh, as artificial intelligence, as AI is getting better and better, games like poker and games like chess and games like Go, even games like Jeopardy apparently are getting solved. Solved meaning like we are getting closer and closer to what is quote unquote perfect play. And so it's definitely happening in the poker world, and the top poker pros in the world are all extremely experienced at using what are called computer solvers to run simulations and determine what the optimal play is, or near optimal play is in many, many given scenarios. And the software is just getting better and better. And so at the top level, uh, you know, poker players sometimes refer to themselves as just like robots because they're just doing what the software is telling them, and it is a little bit unfortunate, and then it's taken some of the raw, human creativity out of the game because computers are just better than our brains. There's no way around it, and so competitive poker. I am curious, and I have a question mark on what the future of competitive poker is in 10, 20 years. Like how many professional poker players will there be in 10 years compared to today? My understanding from speaking with pro friends of mine is that the number is going down, has been going down, and continues to go down. And the size of their like yearly earnings is also going down. And so that leaves like potentially like a dark future, right? Like, what does that mean for the future of poker? My answer to that is, well, poker. I mean, poker does not deserve to die at the hands of computers, right? And so like what I want to do is really reinvent the game and redefine it as a more social game, which is exactly what I'm trying to do. So that now, 10 years from now, maybe competitive poker, is certainly, I don't think it's going anywhere, going like away entirely, but like it will be played by fewer people, and poker, the game of poker, gets played much, much more frequently in social environments where you're playing, again, friends, colleagues, or just folks that share some kind of interest of some kind, where the value that you're getting from the game is not purely how much money am I making. It's actually a lot more about like the friends, the people that I'm meeting, the friends I'm meeting. I mean, for Nathan, you and I, like this conversation would not be happening now if it wasn't for poker and if it wasn't for Loves Poker, and that's pretty awesome. And so that's why I want to do more of that, and I want to save poker from what might be a bleak future if we leave it up to the AI.
Yeah, I agree, and there've got to be a variety of different ways to sort of reclaim that soul, I imagine, right? So I love the idea of just introducing a social element back into the game that pulls you back from, hey, this isn't about just plugging things into a calculator and trying to make as much money as possible. There's a social dynamic here that's got more value than that. Do you think that there's other ways, like, maybe variants or something like that?
Yeah, so there are other variants with a T of poker, like Omaha, for example, that are way less solved and can continue to allow us to have fun playing poker, etc. Also variants with a C E, like Omaha as well, where there is more luck involved and there is just more chaos, frankly, that also creates a really fun experience.
Do you have any instances where thinking in bets and kind of the poker mindset has helped you in life?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this so much. Absolutely yes. I think my life is the way I live my life is fundamentally different, having studied the game of poker. And I mean, the book Thinking in Bets is a great example. I mean, written by Annie Duke, right? Do I have that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yes. So goes into detail on this, and she does a way better job of explaining it than I probably ever could. But if I maybe just like one insight out of like what I've taken from poker into life is to understand the balance between what you can control and what you can't control. And in poker, it's like you can control your bets, but there's a lot of luck involved in poker that then unfortunately you can't control. It's very similar in life, and so I try to not be outcome oriented. Focus on the inputs, right? The process for this could be a major life decision, a small life decision, whatever it is, and understand that like sometimes things are going to go my way and sometimes things are not going to go my way. It is up to random chance a lot of times, and you just kind of got to roll with it. You should be optimizing for like making the best decisions you can with the information you have and not beating yourself up when it didn't go your way because of something that's entirely outside of your control. I know that like in my career, some of the toughest times in my career have been when I'm trying to make a jump from one company to the next. And I'm on the job search, or I'm trying to find my next opportunity, and you have interviews, and the interviews don't always go your way. And it's like I always reflect on those as like I did the best I could, right? I prepared for the interview well. I thought I answered the questions well. I asked good questions on my own. I did everything I thought I should be doing. I didn't get the job, or I didn't get to the next round, and like there's just like there's randomness in that, and there's nothing I can do about that. And I just have to keep going. And it's similar in poker. It's like, yeah, you're not going to win every pot. You just have to keep going. You have to keep applying the principles that are right, that are, or in the case of poker, is a positive EV decision, and in the long run, it's going to pay off. Yeah, it allows me to keep my head down, stay focused on what I know is important, not get so distracted with like one thing not going my way. Um, so yeah, that's one example. If you're interested, actually, this might be good. There's a book called The Biggest Bluff, which is very much about the intersection between life and poker. It's written by a woman named Maria Konnikova. I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She is a psychologist turned author turned professional poker player, and then wrote a book about her experience, and it's really interesting.
That's cool. I will have to check that out. I agree. One of the things that I find can be so unsettling about business and entrepreneurship is that you really can do every single thing right and still fail. And so dealing with that kind of reality has certainly been helpful for me in poker. And I think a lot of folks are really accustomed to being able to stay on the rails and always have things go their way. If I just follow this framework, I'm always going to get an A. That kind of mindset.
Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great to know. I'll have to check that book out. And actually, all that kind of discussion makes me think again, calling back to sort of the future of poker and the future of play. It makes me wonder if I don't know how else to put this, but tilting your opponents and just the psychological aspect of the game just becomes that much more important.
It definitely does. Yeah, I imagine it does. I mean, especially again in more social environments, I think it allows for that more because the players better and kind of what gets under their skin a bit more. You can play that game. Like when you're playing with friends, like when I'm playing with friends, for example, it's like I am playing a fundamentally different game than when I'm trying to like play against strangers. And it's because like I know my friend Eric hates when I do XYZ or hates when I say this, and like yeah, you're playing that game, and it does add an extra layer to the game, which I think is more fun.
One thing that happened in our game lately was I was a very aggressive bettor, and it sort of worked at first, but then everyone sort of got my number, and yeah, that didn't end too well for me. I'll just say that. So, speaking of actual gameplay, any great stories of just extremely memorable hands, either online or in real life, that maybe would be entertaining to share?
No, I mean like any poker player has their bad beat stories and their like ridiculous like the opposite of a bad beat. So like they're flopping quads against a full house and it's just like you just see dollar signs in your eyes. I don't know how interesting those are. I think yeah, my fondest memories are like when I was in college and like didn't have like a ton of money and would walk out of the casino with like um, they would give me a check sometimes, and I just felt like $1,000,000, right? Well, $1,000,000 was not written on the check, let's be clear, but I felt like $1,000,000. It's always super cool. It's always great when you feel like you played well and you felt like you were rewarded for it and you just crushed it. Yeah, those are probably my fondest memories. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have like a one specific hand. I mean, let's be real. Like it's like I top pro poker players will have hands that like have like meaningfully impacted their career, and I have not. Right, I did not play at that level, nowhere close. So I don't think I have any that really stand out to me.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. And the more you play, and especially online, you can really play a lot. They do kind of tend to blur together after a while.
They do, they do. Yeah, yeah.
So that's fun to know. I do love that idea of a college kid just going into a casino and kind of running it up. And you're in college, so if you win even a small amount of money, relatively speaking, it probably seems like a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like poker is like it's always fun to win. It's hard to complain about that, and when you win a lot, it's even better.
You feel real good about yourself.
But keep in mind, losing really sucks. it's it,
Yep.
yeah, it's bad. Another life lesson actually there is like yeah, something like you're not always gonna win, right? You're not like you have to like deal with loss and like deal with the emotions of it. It happens a lot in play. Any poker player has to deal with that, and some of course better than others.
And just that's that human bias where our losses just sting that much worse than the wins. We were even talking about that in the most recent session where one negative comment kind of cancels out 10 positive comments. And that's why I'm a big believer in sort of the power of trying to stay positive and pump people up if you can, because we all got to kind of contribute to that, trying to cancel out all that negativity out there.
Yeah.
I still complain on Twitter though. So final question, if you could go back to someone young, say they're 22, 23, just kind of starting their career, entering the industry, we'll just say the tech industry because that's kind of the one we're mostly involved with, what advice would you give to them?
I think I mean, okay, so like if you're an ambitious person, you want to, you have high hopes for yourself. It could be in your career or really anything. I don't think it really matters. Um, I think understanding that the way to get to where you want to go is by taking baby steps. And I was always, still am, always like frustrated that I'm not at levels higher than where I'm at now, and feeling like you just want to like get there. You just want to be there. Like, why can't I just be at that level that I'm envisioning in my head? And in reality, at least from my experience, and I think probably most people's experiences, it's about taking the baby steps to get there. It's about not trying to get there all at once, but figuring out like, how can I get closer? What's one way I can get like one step closer? And so this is, for me in my career, this is very, very relevant, but not to tie it back to poker, but like also when you're a poker player, like the way you like move, the way you like make more money is you move up. It's called up in stakes. So you're playing bigger and bigger games, and it is an absolute recipe for disaster in poker when you just like skip 3 levels and go to a big game immediately, sit down and start playing. You're gonna lose. You're gonna lose all your money. You have to go back to square one. The way that pro poker players become, where they are, is by what we call building their bankroll, where they're going one level up at a time, very regimented, basically step by step. And yeah, I think that applies to career. I think it applies to relationships as well. And it's the advice that I would give myself, just to like be patient, understand that it really is about just taking baby steps. And as long as you're taking baby steps and making progress, things should work out. I hope they work out.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot, whether it's in career where you look around and go, why didn't I get that promotion? I want it now, even if you didn't make sense as the person to be promoted. And also just that kind of struggle of the grind of when you start to go out and do your own thing. When you start something from scratch, there's very much a grind, very little validation, and then suddenly sometimes you're an overnight success, but it wasn't really overnight.
Yeah, they call it what they call it, the 10-year overnight
Yeah.
success, right? That's the joke. I think it's so true.
Right, and your story about having one game a day, for instance, and then just kind of going until you eventually now have 50 games a day. And I mean, looking around, maybe in 1 year from now, you'll have 1,000 a day.
Yeah, the going from 1 games to 50 games is like a kind of is probably a baby step in the scheme of like where we need to get to, of course. Yeah.
True. Yeah. And, well, I look forward to seeing the website grow. And so hopefully you have the good problem pretty soon of having to retune your Postgres schema and all of that to reconfigure the site to handle all those folks on there.
I look forward to that.
So that should just about do it. And if folks want to find you, they want to check out Clubs Poker, where should they go?
Yeah, it's clubspoker.com is the site, and then you can find me on Twitter at TayKCrane, or you can email me at taylor@clubspoker.com. Yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you doing an interview with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, even though I'm not a coffee drinker. Appreciate it. Appreciate the inclusivity.
Thank you to Taylor for that excellent interview. And now, without further ado, we'll go into the Hacker Huddle. Today, we're going to talk about minting an NFT, a non-fungible token, using Solana CLI tools. And so Solana is a new blockchain project, and it's just so dang fast. It can handle so many transactions that I really think there's a lot of potential here. You can see I made this create NFT.shell script here just to kind of glue a few things together. And I'll link that to a GitHub gist in the description for the video. But let's talk about what it's doing. So the very first things here are just standard bashisms, and especially that set -x I wanted to have in there so we can see each step as it's happening when we eventually run this. The first thing that we'll do to create the NFT is we'll use the SPL token CLI create token command to actually create a token in the first place. On Solana, you can just create these tokens natively. It's super easy, and you can send them around and just kind of have fun and do stuff with them. Maybe I'll make another video on that some other time. Then we need to create an account for the token, and that's used to track how many of those tokens are in circulation and who has them. So this account will be created with SPL token, create account token. And so you can see we're using that token ID that we got back in that previous step to create the account. So now we have a token and an account for that token, and now we're just going to mint one of that token, right? We could have any arbitrary amount for a fungible token. We could have 100 of them in circulation or millions. But in this case, because it's a non-fungible token that we want to have just one of, we're just going to say one. And so we use the mint command to mint one of these. And then we have one final step here to make it the non-fungible token, which is that we're going to say, hey, this token should not be allowed to mint anymore, right? So the SPL token authorize command is used to change around those permissions. And what we're going to do here is this final step is we're going to disable minting of any new tokens. And so when we run that, now we'll have our fancy little NFT. So creating an NFT is super easy. And I think, kind of the hard work is tying it together with that bridge to the real world. I have an NFT now, but who wants this? It's essentially just a hash on the blockchain. You can see now that we ran this, you can kind of see it more in action. So here's our little token, Boom K, and we created the account for that Boom K token there. And now we mint one of them. So we mint one token and we have the signature. And one of the kind of fun things about Solana is they have the Solana Explorer. All of this, by the way, is happening on the DevNet. So this is just for experimentation. You don't have to spend any actual money if you want to try this out yourself. You can just target the DevNet because the DevNet's a great little spot to just try things out, get wacky, create an NFT, whatever you want. And here's the disabling of the mint authority. And so if I wanted to look up this transaction signature that was confirmed on the blockchain, I can pop over to the Solana Explorer here. And in this Solana Explorer, you can see I've selected the DevNet, right? You can also look things up on the mainnet or the testnet. But because we're using the DevNet, the transaction will only be present here. And so if I look this transaction up, I can go and see all these details about it, right? I can see that now this transaction is finalized. It's had the maximum number of confirmations, and I can also see which block it was confirmed in. So that's kind of fun. Because now in the Explorer, you can look around and just kind of see all these different things you can learn about these transactions that you're running on the Solana blockchain. And I also think the Explorer is cool because it's kind of just like a giant example app for the Solana API, right? In order to actually do this stuff, what these command line tools that we're using are doing behind the scenes is they're making RPC calls in Rust to the Solana API. And so those validator nodes will, if I understand correctly, be handling those requests and then doing the actual work to, in this case, create that token, create the account, modify the parameters, like how many are available, disable the minting authority, and kind of handle that permissions model and that kind of thing. So there you go. There's an NFT. This is what all the hype is all about. And I think Solana is so sick. So I'll probably be making some more Solana content in the future. Thanks for tuning in to the Hacker Huddle.